Okay, yeah, welcome to this week's week ahead. So, from the 22nd to 26th, so like we normally do, we have the previous week snapshot. So, for the prior week, couple of interesting things happened. We have the Fed dropped their easing bias, the new chair being Kevin Walsh and stuff like that. So, he had the rhetoric of hawkish because the markets expected that he would be a puppet in the hand of the president, but he he wasn't like that. He also introduced some new things, tax force for so many key things, the data, the information. It was also the shortest statement ever for a long while. So it's a new Fed. So that is the outtake. Then in UK, inflation remained flat at 2.8%, supporting the BOE, which is the Bank of England, to hold rate. Then in Switzerland, growth ticked up a little bit. Then in Japan, there was a rebound in inflation. In Japan. Then finally, and the BOJ hiked rates. Then finally, in Nigeria, inflation ticked up to 15.93%. So which is but on month it ticked down due to baseline effect. Then yeah, for the bond market, the yields are pretty high. Global yields are still high, ranging from the UK bond also still very much high due to the political turmoil happening over there. Then in US too, there was a repricing in the 10-year yield. So if you overlay it, you see that it's added up. Then for this week, macro is a light macro data week. So not much thing. We'll be expecting the final print of GDP data from the US on Thursday. The last print was at 1.6%. So the final print we'll be expecting it. Then in Canada this Monday, just in an hour plus time, we'll be expecting the inflation print. So definitely the market expectation is that inflation is going to tick up. The BOC, in their last rate decision, they held rate because inflation is pretty contained in Canada. Then in Australia, you are also expecting two big data this week from them. First of all, their inflation prints and then the labor market data. Inflation in Australia ticked down the last time, then the labor market cracked. So that is why the RBA in their last meeting they were somehow they held rates because they have been hiking all this while. So if you overlay those data points, you see that these two data coming out will determine if they are going to resume their hiking or if they are going to continue holding. Then for the equity front, the NGX here, they have reviewed their volume trading. Now you need some couple of volumes to move stocks that are worth over 10,000. Unlike before, you need like 100,000 or 10,000 units to move them. But now, with 1,000 units, you can move. So small adjustments. So for the big stocks like your Seplat and the rest, now smaller volume. If you can trade up to 10,000 volume, you can move them. Unlike before. Then finally, from the CBN funds, the CBN also dropped a proposal for the financial holding companies. So the proposal is that the holdcos should have at least 50% plus holding of all the holdings. What it means is this: have some financial holdcos that are bank, insurance, asset management. So before you become a holdco, you have to have at least the minimum of their capital requirements. Then on the geopolitical front, The last thing is we know that the US and Iran, they have signed the 60 days MOU and negotiation is going on. Last on Sunday, and VP Vance, they have some sticky points in their discussion that led to Vance, Iran retweeting that they are going to close the strip. But so far, the strip is still open. So they will be negotiating towards the Hezbollah, Israel, enriching of the uranium and something like that. So it's still fragile. So all eye on that. Then finally, UK, this morning, the data that hit the wire is that Starmer has resigned. Yeah, PM Starmer, he will resign due to the political pressure. So Bowman is going to be the new PM for the UK. So finally, let's now, so that's the what we have on the weather. Then let's go look at some for the another thing is that happened is you see that ARA there, their result is out, which we have analyzed. So you go on our YouTube page, watch it, go on X and download it and see what's happened. So we are still waiting for their Q1 results. Once it shows up, we're going to analyze it for you guys with other stuff we analyze too. So as it's loading up, we have some for the currency front. There's some opportunities we'll be looking for within the week as the market evolves. So you see that there's no much data points for the week. So there's still opportunity from the US market too. There's still opportunity for the stocks. You reach out to our research team. We guide you on the ones if you are pretty confused, but if you know what you are doing, you can use some of those research we make available to make some good decisions for yourself. Then for the NGX, there's still opportunity, even though there is a pullback coming from the rhetoric of Dangote's upcoming IPO. So people are selling off to take position to keep cash. Of course, what do they say? They say the most liquid ones. So that's why you are seeing some replacement. But year to date, the market has also done over 50+%. Okay, sorry. So so on the technical front, you see that the VIX is still below 20, which shows there is a respawn in the global market. Of course, we know this tracks the S&P, which is a Standard & Poor. Then on the currency front, these are what we are looking at to see if there will be opportunity. Of course, to short the euro using the yen, then look to buy the Swiss and the Swiss, selling the Swiss using USD NZD. Then, sure, but another final thing you